Now, how are we going to keep these four agreements? Welcome to Sobriety Snippets for Ambitious Women over 40, helping you elevate your mindset to exchange hangovers for higher consciousness, one powerful snippet at a time. I'm Becca Jacobson, and it's Monday, gals, and that means book study. We are doing Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements. We've done the Four Agreements, and today we're doing Chapter 6, The Toltec Path to Freedom, subtitled Breaking Old Agreements. Okay, gals, this chapter is really meaty, really meaty. So to do it in one snippet, we are going to look mainly focusing on how to break free from old agreements. Ruiz gives us a lot more information in this chapter. It would be one worth sitting down and working with, really reading it, underlining, taking notes, looking at it, coming back to it, and really working if you want to hold yourself to the four agreements. But we're going to look at lightly at some of the more key pieces that he talks about. And the thing that really struck me was freedom. Freedom is what he talks about here. On page 93, which is where this chapter begins, he says, "Are we free to be who we really are?" The answer is no, we are not free. Wow. Okay, let's talk about this. For you and I, this is significant because we've suffered from lack of freedom because of our obsession with alcohol. We're not free, that's for sure, when we've got alcohol on board or anywhere near us in our lives. And we know that feeling of being tied to something that we just can't seem to get rid of. Well, Ruiz gives us a deeper look at freedom and what holds us back from even being ourselves. So let's look this over. I'm going to read a pretty chunky piece here because it's so well written that I want us to hear it together. Here is what Ruiz says about freedom in the very beginning of this chapter. True freedom has to do with the human spirit. It is the freedom to be who we really are. What stops us from being free? We blame the government. We blame the weather. We blame our parents. We blame religion. We blame God. Who really stops us from being free? We stop ourselves. What does it really mean to be free? Sometimes we get married and we say that we lose our freedom. Then we get divorced and we are still not free. What stops us? Why can't we be ourselves? If we see a child who is 2 or 3, perhaps 4 years old, we find a free human. This is where it gets interesting, gals. Back to Ruiz. Why is this human free? Because this human does whatever he or she wants to do. This human is completely wild. And then on the next page, he continues, but what has happened with the adult human? Why are we so different? Why are we not wild? And this is what he focuses on. This is so important for us, circling back to the beginning. So you'll recall that the first chapter was about domestication, which Ruiz calls it, or socialization, how we're brought up, we're in our society, we're taught what we're taught. We're given a religion, we're brought into a certain type of socioeconomic circle. We are socialized or domesticated, just like animals, right? And it's because of that domestication that we're not free. This is what Ruiz is focusing on throughout this book. He's saying, go ahead and break those agreements. Be impeccable with your word. Break that agreement. Don't take it personally. Break that agreement. Don't make assumptions. Break that other agreement and do your best. They seem so obvious, so simple, but when we start looking at them and trying to practice them, we realize we're not free. So I love how he compares us to children and how children are free. I did a snippet a while ago, a few months back, I think, comparing being childish to childlike. And I strongly, strongly recommended in that snippet that we try and be more childlike. And this is exactly why. We definitely don't want to be childish. That's a completely different thing. But to be more childlike, to be freer, to be more full of wonder, to be more open to excitement, enthusiasm about life, that's what we need for our sobriety. It really is, gals, because we are, I don't know the right word for it, but alcohol dampens the spirit. it dulls the spirit. It dulls us. And we lose all sense of that childlike wonder. And this is what Ruiz is talking about. He's encouraging us to realize we're not free, but he does tell us how we can be free. So let's keep going. In this section, Ruiz refers back to the victim and the judge. Do you remember the victim and the judge from chapter 1? In that chapter, he explained that we all have inside of us an internal judge and an internal victim. And these two characters who reside inside of us, like parasites, keep us bound to the agreements that we made without even knowing we were making those agreements during our domestication. So we've got to start looking at the judge and the victim, and that's what he addresses a little further on in this chapter. Here's what he says about it. What has happened is that we have the book of law, the big judge and the victim who rule our lives. We are no longer free because the judge, the victim, and the belief system don't allow us to be who we really are. Once our minds have been programmed with all that garbage, we are no longer happy. Isn't that interesting? And I don't think we even realize it until someone like this comes along and says it out loud. And this book is a major best-selling book and translated into I don't know how many languages. How many people around the world have read it? It's a human desire to be free. I don't know how many people actually do the 4 agreements. I haven't met very many, but a lot of people read this book. That means we have this desire, this innate desire to break free, to be more childlike. It takes so much courage to break free from the parasites of the judge and the victim and the rules, the belief systems that we've been given, that it's almost overwhelming. But don't lose heart. Ruiz explains to us over and over. He says that if I can do it, you can do it. I'm just like you. Really, it's like deciding to grow emotionally instead of just giving up alcohol. That decision has to include these types of commitments to our personal growth. So if you decide to take up the 4 agreements, that is a commitment to giving up surface dwelling and digging deep and making changes in your life that are significant. We cannot do the 4 agreements by reading about them once or twice, or even talking about them once or twice, and then moving on. This is a really good example of what I call avoiding surface dwelling. You could just take the last 5 Mondays, look at the book, listen to these snippets again, and just practice this for months. It would take actually probably more than months to get this really ingrained in our lives. Most of us won't do that work. It's just too much work. We say we want to be free, but are we willing to do that much work? I don't know, babe. I haven't seen very many people that are. Let's carry on here. On page 102, Ruiz says this: the freedom we seek is to use our own mind and body to live our own life instead of the life of the belief system. When we discover that the mind is controlled by the judge and the victim, and the real us is in the corner, we have 2 choices. Here they are, gals. One choice is to keep living the way we are, to surrender to the judge and the victim, to keep living in a dream of the planet. The second choice is to do what we do as children when parents try to domesticate us. We can rebel and say, no! We declare a war against the parasite, a war against the judge, and a war against the victim, a war for our independence, a war for the right to use our mind and our own brain. Ruiz tells us to be warriors. And here's his description of a warrior. The warrior is one who rebels against the invasion of the parasite. And the parasites are the victim, the judge, and the brainwashing, right? Brainwashing's my word, not his. Ruiz spends the rest of this chapter teaching us how to be warriors, and it's very in-depth. I strongly recommend, if this interests you, you come back and check out the rest of this chapter. But that is the part that I wanted us to look at together. The idea of freedom, and mainly really for us, specifically around alcohol and our struggle, it's about the effort. Are we willing to stop surface dwelling and stop reading and listening and settle down to a strategy that appeals to us and making it work in our lives? That's what I'm trying to get every single gal in Snippet Land to do. Pick a path. I'm not saying you have to pick only one and stick with it forever, but try something out long enough to decide whether or not it actually worked in your life. Have you read a book on meditation? Great. Have you tried it for any length of time? Have you read a book on yoga? Great. Have you tried it for any length of time? Whatever it is. We gather information, gals, but we don't practice enough. And that is the key to transformation and, ready? The key to emotional sobriety, the key to getting to where you and I want. I know we all want the same thing here. You know what that is? I know you know. We don't want to quit drinking. We want to quit wanting to drink. That, for us, is true freedom. Where you can get locked in the liquor store overnight and not even care. That is true freedom. Well, I wouldn't want you locked in a liquor store, but you get my point. We want to not have to even worry about alcohol, but the only way to get there is to commit to a deeper practice over time. And it doesn't have to be one specific practice. There's so many ways that we can grow emotionally. What we've been doing with alcohol is allowing our emotions to be buried. They come up, we go, no, 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 and we push them away with alcohol, and they just simmer down below. They don't go away. We don't know how to handle them. They get worse and worse, and we get more and more volatile, more and more unhappy. And what we have to do is put down the alcohol and learn how to grow into our emotions, grow into emotional maturity, which is such a beautiful process. It might sound scary. I want you to know it's not. If I'd have known how easy it was, man, I'd have done it decades ago. But I was afraid, and so I understand the fear. I really, really do. If you can't take my word for it, you can take tiny steps and start getting a feeling of deeper freedom by working on your emotional maturity, which is what we're really all about here. And emotional maturity requires us to take on mindsets that allow us to grow. And mindset is really important to the journey and a huge, huge part of Snippet Land. So, gals, that's chapter 6. We are going to come back next week and look at chapter 7 called The New Dream, subtitled Heaven on Earth. I wasn't going to actually do this last chapter, but I read it again and I thought, no, we cannot skip this chapter. It is so beautiful. Here's the opening line, just to tease you for next week. Ruiz says this on page 123. I want you to forget everything you have ever learned in your whole life. This is the beginning of a new understanding, a new dream. That's what we're doing. Next Monday, gals, we're going to do chapter 7, The New Dream, and it's going to show us what's possible. I'm really, really excited for that. Gals, if you want your own personal story to be heard and reflected, the Sacred Mirror is open. The link is in the show notes. The Sacred Mirror is a simple online forum where you share a tiny piece of your story with me and me alone, and I respond by turning on this microphone and sending you back a reflection. Not advice, not a sales pitch, a reflection, just for you. Thanks for popping in. Be sure to come back next time so I can keep your head on straight. Sending you buckets of love.